Hi, folks. James Oldenburg here. I just thought I'd relate a couple ideas on dominant chords today. So, dominant chords are the chords that are typically played in blues. And when you play a blues using dominant chords, it's typically all dominant chords, which is a little different than most styles of music. But the dominant chord does occur in all songs, really, and it occurs naturally as the fifth note of any key. So if you were in the key of C, say, then C, D, E, F, G would be the dominant chord of that key. And I won't get into why that all is, but except for that of how it's formed. So the dominant chord is formed, as all chords are formed, from a major scale. So today we'll look at the key of G and a blues in G, and that'll be a good vehicle to demonstrate what I want to share with you. So if I look at a G major scale, it's just the notes of G to G through the alphabet, and the thing you have to remember about the G major scale is that it has an F sharp in it, because the key of G has an F sharp. So that gives us our regular sort of do, re, mi, fa, sol thing. Now, if you don't know about major scales, maybe read up on them. They're where everything comes from. So everything about chords is going to be related to a major scale. So if you don't know that, you're kind of hooped for just memorizing shapes or something that are arbitrary. So I can show it to you here just briefly. A G major scale would be G. I'm playing it with my second finger on the low string at fret 3. So if I just follow this scale up, I'm going to get G. A would be 2 frets higher. Then B would be my first finger. C is only a half step away. D is 2 frets away. E is also 2 frets away, but on the next string. F sharp is 2 frets away. And G is 1 fret away. So if I play that together, I get do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So that's your G major scale. Now on the guitar, because I'm not playing any open strings, I can raise that pattern. So if you can think about it as a pattern as well, that's great. Patterning is all over the guitar, so it's good to see what you're doing. So if I look at it as a pattern now, it's 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. So if I do that anywhere, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, I get do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Anywhere I want to go, it forms a major scale based off of this second finger. Now, also because of the way the guitar is set up, if I go up a string, it's identical. So now we know this note is C. So if I play the same pattern, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, I get a C major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Sounds exactly the same. So if I go up with that one, I get all these different keys. They're all the same major scale, but they're starting on a different note. So that gives you 2 places to play a major scale in every key. There's 12 keys total. So that's enough about scales. So now if we use that information and we think about them sort of generically, I don't need to think specifically about the actual notes I'm playing all the time. So I can think about them as numbers. If this is 1, that's the root, that's the key we're in, the key of G. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the reason we want to think of numbers is because chords are built off of these numbers. So because we're talking about the dominant 7th chord again. Again, this is a very specific chord. So if you say G7, it's kind of a short form, C7, D7. People will say these chords, but what they actually mean is a G dominant 7 or C dominant 7. It's just kind of a mouthful, so you shorten it and just say G7. So there are many different kinds of seventh chords. So if I wanted the sound of a major seven, that's a different sound. That's a very pretty sound. Whereas the dominant seventh chord we're talking about is tense. It's got kind of a little bit of anger in there, a little tension going on. And so the reason that tension is there is it's set up between two particular notes, which are the most common notes of any chord, or the most important notes, I should say, of any chord. And that would be the third degree and the seventh. So if we look at a dominant seventh chord and say, well, what notes make up that chord from that scale that I just played, it would be the root, of course, because it's a G chord. I'm playing a G. I'm playing the third note, 1, 2, 3. I'm playing the fifth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm playing the flatted seventh note. So sure, I'll find the 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but I flatten it 1 fret lower. And that's the sound of a G seventh chord, where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, and then back to G again. So that would be another special kind of scale that I won't get into right now, but that scale is now a tense sounding scale. It doesn't sound like do, re, mi anymore, because it sounds like it has a wrong note in it. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It sounds kind of sour. But that's, again, the sound of the blues. It's about anger and struggles. And so this sound, if I play only those two notes, I get that tension in there, which is what drives the music forward and makes it quite interesting, actually. So again, if I look at those now as numbers, I get the root, the 3, the 5, and the flatted 7. Now I can play those in any octave. So here's my root again, G. The third is B. The fifth is D. And the flatted 7 would be an F natural. Play it there or there, right? Same note. So out of those 4 notes, so we have a root, a 3, a 5, and a 7. Those are common to any type of chord. But the most important notes of any chord are not the root and the fifth, which is, kind of contrary to the way most people think. I think because they're so used to playing on the guitar anyway, power chords, which is, if this is G, that's 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, root 5. Sometimes you'll see it notated as G5, so that's a power chord. Those two notes are actually kind of useless because the bass player's probably doing them anyway, and they don't give you any color of the chord. So I'll explain that. For those that know bar chords, you'll see this. If this is my G major chord, you can see I've got a root and a 5 in there. Now if I change that to G minor, I've still got the same root and 5. So they didn't do anything to make the minor sound. If I go to G7, you hear that tension in there, it's still got the 1 and 5. So if I just play these, I'm not getting any of that color. I'm not saying whether the chord's major or minor or 7th. I'm just saying it's a G, which, again, somebody else in the band, notably the bass player, will be taking care of that for us, so we don't need to do it. And in fact, if we do it, we're kind of in his territory, so it's just going to make it muddy, and it's not going to really add anything to the sound of what you're trying to do. So again, our focus is the 3 and the 7. So in the dominant chord, it's specifically the 3 and the flat 7. So 1, 2, 3, that note is B now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but flatten it. There's my flatted 7. That's an F note. So I've got a B and an F. So now this is another shape you want to remember. This shape, just 2 strings apart with the higher string 1 fret higher than this one, will give us what's called a tritone. Now, a tritone is what you would think, 3 tones. But I'm only playing 2 notes, so I'm not playing a 3-note chord. In these 2 notes, though, this first note, if I go 1 whole tone higher, I would get this note here. Another whole tone higher, I would get this. Another whole tone higher, I would get this. So there's my 3 tones. Start here. This is 1 whole tone, 2 whole tones, 3 whole tones higher, which is this note. So there we can play them together. That's why it's called a tritone. So again, super tense. It's the sound that they use on, emergency vehicles, police cars, ambulances. Right? It's pretty annoying. So in the blues, though, it creates that tension that creates movement. So it's beautiful in the blues. And in anywhere that you want to create movement, it's kind of like it's a little nasty, so you want to get off of it, and it makes the nice chord sound so nice. So if I went from here, here's my tense, and here's my resolve. Right, so I get... Right, so I get the tension that kind of leads you into the next chord. So the interesting thing about these tritones now is that you can play them in different places and the shape stays the same. So again, I'm going to go back to the first shape. I got 1, 2, 3. Again, I don't need the G, even though I'm playing a G chord. I need the 3 and I need the flatted 7, which is there. So we refer to this as a B and an F. Now, if I keep the F and go same shape, I get a B there. So that's kind of handy. All I remember is that shape. F, B, B, F. And if I go down a string, B, F, it's the same. So F, B, switch places, B, F, switch places back, F, B. Now here, the next string, I can keep going. I'll go to the B, but it won't be here because this string is tuned differently. So I have to go a fret higher on this string. And that's just a property on the guitar. Every time you're dealing with the second string, it's a little bit of a pain, but you have to go 1 fret higher with everything. So there's the same sound as that, or that, or that. So now I can keep this F, this was B, this is F, and I can just resume our old shape now. So it's basically this 1-2 shape, or 2-3, or 3-4, however way you want to finger it, doesn't matter. You're going to create the chords for a blues. So it's nice if you're accompanying a soloist to play sort of more in the middle of the guitar. So I wouldn't play it down here just because, again, I'm in the bass player's way here, and it's same like power chords. Like, it's just you're in the way, that someone's already doing that. So if I play down here, it's going to sound a bit dark, still pretty dark. That's kind of okay, because the singer's probably going to be above this and the bass player's going to be below this. So it's kind of a good place to hang out. Now, having said that, if a piano player is already playing there, well, I might go up here, or I might even go up here. Okay, so there's lots of choices on this thing. So that's only dealing with the first chord of a blues. So a G 7th chord. Instead of playing this big thing, or playing like a cowboy G 7th like that, all we really need is those 2 notes. So now how we got that chord again, just to review that, was 1, 2, 3, which was the note B. I didn't play it down there in the chord because it's too dark. But I went 1, 2, 3, and I remembered that was a B. 4, 5, 6, flat 7 is the F. G would be 1 again, or 8. So if this is 1, 1, 2, 3, there's my 3 again, the B. Those are octaves, 2 Bs. Doesn't matter which one I use, but as we said before, we're going to pick this middle ground because it's a little, not too dark, not too happy sounding up top, not too cutting, so it's a nice place to hang out to play chords. So here's the really cool thing. We talked about that scale shape, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4 for a major scale. If I go to the C now and go up a string, it's identical. So 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4 gives me a C major scale. So I've got all these places just with one shape. 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. I can play in different keys. I can play in the key of G, key of B flat, key of A flat, key of C, key of E flat, with one finger shape. So that's a really important scale. All our chords are built off of this major scale, and you only really need to know one shape to understand the theory that we're talking about here. It's great to know them everywhere, but that's a whole other story. So if I look at that C chord, which is the 4 chord in a blues, you know the blues goes the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, like many popular songs, regardless of style. It's probably the most common progression using the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. So if we're talking about the key of G, we're talking about a G, G, A, B, C, and D. So G, C, and D. So if I look at those notes, I get G, C, and D. So many of you know to play just power chords, G, C, and D. If I played normal chords, I could play cowboy chords, G, C, and D. Now again, the blues can be done with that, but it's almost like there's not enough tension in these chords. So if I play G7, you can hear the tension to C7, to D7. Now you can hear more, it's sounding a little bit more bluesy when I use those tense notes in there. So those ways of playing the chords you can see required all different shapes. Some of them can raise. I could slide up for D7, but there's a myriad of places I could play these. You'll see a lot of players use bar chords. So if I play a G7 bar chord, all the strings, then I would go G, A, B, C, 7, and D7. Well, that's a lot of traveling around, and it's also quite a lot of sound coming out. Too much, because again, we're in the bass player's way by doing that a lot of times. So what we're doing is we're saying the 3 and the flat 7 are the most important notes of a dominant 7th chord. So if I play the 3 and the 7, here's the 3 of G. It was a B, and the flat 7 is the F. A good way to locate it, because we're not playing the root. It's kind of awkward sometimes, because it's like, well, where the heck do I go with this? And I'm not even playing a G, but it's a G chord. There's the G for a reference. 2 strings higher, same fret, will give you the flatted 7. There's the octave G. So again, if this is G and this is G, that's the normal 7th right beside the octave. Here's the flatted 7. So you can think of either way. You can think of if this is my flat 7, this is the root, or directly down here, same fret. It's probably the easier way to think about it. So now flat 7, 3. When I go to a C chord, remembering that it started down here, 1, 2, 3. The third of a C chord is E. The 7th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is the note B, but we need a flatted 7, so we need a B flat. So there's my 2 notes, E, B flat. Now, you can see it's identical shape to the G. The G was here. And that's the neat thing about this tritone, is that they're so close that they sound great together. Now, I could play this tritone. There's the G bass. Now, again, thinking from the big bar chord thing that a lot of people play, G7 to C7, there's my tritone. It's buried in that big thing that you're already playing. So I could do this to play the blues that way. back to the 4. But there's a big, it's a long way to go. And I can do the same thing, though, by going down a fret, which is kind of weird. You would think if this is G, this is G flat. It can be G flat, too, but that's another story. So if I go down, I'm calling it C because what's happened is this was the flatted 7 in the G. This was the 3. When I go down a fret, this is now functioning as the 3. Again, there's my C. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Flat 7. So they flipped spots. That's all. And that's why they can be so close. It's a great little trick. So this is the G chord. This is the C chord. And then if I go 2 frets higher than that, that would be the 5 chord. So if this is 1, the 4 is lower 1 fret, the 5 is higher 1 fret. Awesome. So we have a nice little package. Okay, so I'm going to play through you just a 12-bar blues, which I'm sure you all understand. If you don't, the first phrase goes the 1 chord for a bar, 4 chord for a bar, back to the 1 chord for 2 bars. That's the first line. Second line goes 4 chord for 2 bars, and then back to the 1 chord for 2 bars. The last line, the last group of 4, goes to the 5 for 1 bar, the 4 for 1 bar, and back to the 1 for 1 bar, and it finally ends on the 5 again. So there's our 12 bars. So I'm going to just put a bass player on, and I'm going to play with him on this and just show you a basic 12-bar blues using this. I'll play it straight, and then I'll add a little bit of rhythm to it the second time so you can see how, I may use this. And again, this is something that I use all the time playing in a band situation to not sort of overplay in someone else's territory. So 1, 4, 1, 2 bars. Next second line, 4 chord for 2 bars. Back to the 1 chord for 2 bars. Last line, 5, 4, 1, ending on 5. Rhythms. I can play them separately, notes. I can fill up the gap. Right, so when I went from 4 to 5, there's a fret in between. You can always add that. And you've heard that in many blues tunes, especially towards the end there. So, remembering that this tritone is a very cool little thing to give you the sound of a dominant 7th chord with only 2 fingers, so it's not creating a lot of problems with the frequency that you're hogging all the space, and it's also easy to play because it's 2 fingers. And it's cool to remember the pattern because 1's here, 4 is here, 5 is the other side of 1, and that's it. It's a little package. Remembering now that this thing can bounce around. So here's my initial tritone, F and B. I can go B and F. So I can do the same thing here. 1 chord, here's G7, here's C7. Back to G, here's D7. Okay, so now I can go higher. I can go back to this one. I can go up 1. So this is B now, and this is F. So this is my G7. Again, that's the root. But I'm quite a bit higher now. I'm in a different register. But the same rule applies. If this is 1, 4 is there. 1, 5 is on the other side. I can keep the high note. So this is B and F. That's my G7th chord. If I keep the F and stick the B on top, now I'm way up here. Same thing applies. So 1 chord, 4, 1, 5. So if I monkey around with all these, I'll show you I'll probably overuse them, but as far as switching, but you can switch anytime you like. most guys, will kind of keep in an area for one time through the blues, and then maybe the next time they may choose to stay there, or they may go somewhere else, so a different register to give it a different texture. So here's an example of that. Using both of them. This one. Lower. Kind of weird down there. But if I'm down there, I just go up. 5. C. Back to G. So they're super useful, these things, and they give you the sound of that chord, the dominant 7th chord, using the 3, the third of the scale, the major scale, and the flat 7 of the major scale. So that's a great way to access them, a great way to play them, practice them just as, again, these little 2-note, it's called a diad, a chord with just 2 notes in it. So these dyads that just move 1 fret apart, kind of got the ground covered. And so that's from more of an accompaniment point of view, but I know for soloing, most of you will know the pentatonic scale. So if I play a G minor pentatonic, there's different kinds of pentatonics, but the ones that everybody I know will know are the minor pentatonics. So G minor is like this. Across the fretboard, and that's a great scale to use over the blues, and you probably already do that in rock tunes or blues tunes or country tunes. Country tunes will tend to use a major pentatonic more, but that's another story. So here in this minor pentatonic scale, we can also turn it into a blues scale by adding one more note. So it's the first note, the flat 3, the 4, and instead of going to the 5, we can join the 4 to the 5 with this blue note, which is really a cool note. So in this key, that would be a D flat. If I look at it up here, there's our normal pattern. If I add the blue note, there's the D flat right there. And you can see how tense it sounds. It's a great sound. Right? So if I use this to our tritone, again, to establish the chord, let's say I want to just play all by myself, no bass player, no band, but I want to still hear the chord. The problem with the pentatonic scale, unless you're playing specific with it, specific choices of notes, it just sounds like you're noodling. Like you're not, I don't hear any chords in there. They all sound like they're sort of G-based things. But if I play the chord and then play a lick, I'll maybe play the same lick so you can hear how it sits against the chords. I'm going to play the chord, the tritone on beat 1. And then I'm going to do a lick. Let's say I go 2 and 3 and 4. All I did was come down the scale. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. So I'll do that for every chord in the blues. So I go 1, 2 and 3 and 4 to the C chord. Back to the G. And I get to do that twice. Back to the C. And again. And back to the G. Twice. To the D chord, same lick. To the C chord. And back home to the G. And ending on the D. Sorry, I missed that note there. So that's showing you that you can sort of do both worlds at the same time. You can accompany yourself and play some lines. So if I free that up a little bit, I can also use these notes as more of a soloing. So again, if I play all by myself, I might do something like this. So you could hear the chord, and then I would noodle a line and then play the next chord, so you can hear the form of the tune. So I was still kind of playing these more like a chord as just a stab, and then I played a line, new chord, back to the first chord. So all I did was do that for the chord. Again, just move 2 fingers around. So if let's say now I've got a bass player, I don't have to cover the chords so much, but I can still make use of these. If I'm just going to solo, again, just to spark up your soloing, if you're playing this scale already. Well, if I add this tritone notes, the 2 notes are F and B, the F is already in my pattern. Right there and right there. But if I add this B, it's not in my scale pattern. It skips that note. But if I add it, I'll get closer to the major sound of a G chord. So it's kind of like a sweet sour thing. It's kind of like you're playing minor sounds, which sounds sad and kind of sour a little bit. But then if I play the major, it sounds kind of happy. So you're kind of mixing both of them a bit by adding the tritone. So I can add the tritone to each chord. So when it's a G7 chord, I could play these 2 notes. In fact, this one added note. When I go to a C7 chord, this note is already in my scale, different finger, but it's there. I add this note, the E, and that's the third of a C chord. So that's going to make it sound like a C chord and a little bit happier. And when I go to a D7 chord, remembering that our tritone here's my D scale, 1, 2, 3. The third note is F sharp. And the C is this flatted 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Again, generating that same tritone just a fret higher. But this note, the F sharp, is the new note now, because that's not in our regular pentatonic pattern. So I'll just do a couple of times through with that idea. So now I'm only going to solo, but I'm going to use these tritone ideas as melodic figures. So I'm not trying to play any chords here. So there's a little interesting thing about tritones. So the 3 and the flat 7 in a dominant 7th chord are the most important notes. The whole chord is made up of a root, a 3, a 5, and a flat 7. So now the 3 and the 7, on a dominant chord it's flat 7, but for any chord that you ever play, the 3 and the 7 are the most important sounds that you can make as a guitar player, really, or as any sort of chordal instrument. Even a melodic instrument. So a saxophone player might, just focus on those notes to outline the chord. They're sounding like they're playing the chord. So I hope that helps in your blues and spices it up a little bit with the addition of the tritone. Thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.